Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Eleanor and I am one of the co-directors of the Empower Project, and with me is Emily, who will introduce herself too.
Hi everyone, I'm Emily, as Eleanor said, and also a co-director at the Empower Project. It's really nice to see so many people joining the session today. We're really looking forward to chatting through this presentation with you.
So Emily, if you could go to the next slide, please.
Indeed.
So just to give you a brief introduction to who the Empower Project are, we are a voluntary-led organisation based in Scotland. It is just me and Emily plus our board of trustees, and we primarily look at gender-based violence in the digital age through a feminist lens. If you go to the next slide. So the Empower Project kind of model of working is that we go to where people are and we hear what their experiences are of tech abuse, and we put on different events such as pizza parties, which is our favourite one, but also picnics, discos and discussion groups to learn from people about what they think we need to do to tackle tech abuse. And so our model is working for people from the bottom up, so that each community can lead and change tech abuse with the knowledge and connections that we've provided. So equality is at the forefront of everything we do as a feminist organisation. And just on the screen here is just kind of a breakdown of a number of different events that we've ran. So we hosted a discussion group about making change, so looking at revenge porn, harassment. And we also held an event with young people at the Scottish Parliament last year, looking specifically at how to make the internet safer for young people. And another thing that we do a fair amount of is zine making. That's something that we tend to build into our workshops, and you've got a couple of examples of zines there. And if we jump to the next slide. So we use lots of different techniques to speak to people to work in tech abuse, whether that is training practitioners and looking at bystander approaches, working with policymakers, or attending roundtables with government officials. We believe that no one should be fearful of going online, and that digital spaces should be safe for everyone. And importantly, mostly to us, is that we want to ensure the work that we do is fun. So I am going to hand over to Emily now, who's just going to introduce specifically what we'll be looking at in this session.
Sure. So in this session, we're going to be taking you through some basic steps focused around how you can make an impact on social media working within your specific organisation. As a tiny organisation ourselves at the Empower Project, as Eleanor has said, we completely appreciate and understand a lot of the challenges and the difficulties that you might face focusing on your social media and running engagement on social, potentially if it's tagged onto your day job, if you're relying on volunteers, or if you're someone who's quite new to running social campaigns and to building up followers on social media as well. Even if you are someone who's really experienced and you've got lots of digital and social experience, it can also be really challenging as someone who works in a women's organisation to run social with the huge amount of different issues that we're dealing with on a regular basis as well. So we're going to give you lots of tips and hints when thinking about how to plan your social media campaigns throughout this session. So first of all, I just wanted to chat a little bit about why social media. And social media as a channel over the last decade has grown exponentially. It's evolved from an online space where you can kind of chat to your friends and send people a love heart on Bebo. It has grown into a huge channel that can influence global political movements, can change the course of elections, and that you can instead make a multi-million-pound career on if you are a social media influencer. So there's been such a rapid change that's happened through the social media channel as a medium in a relatively short space of time. But what that does mean for women's organisations is that we now have a huge range of opportunities over a multitude of different platforms we can use when we're engaging with various types of people. So these are just some of the things that at Empower we kind of use and build upon in social media. So engagement obviously is something really important and powerful when we're thinking about our social engagement. We can reach people in a way that we potentially maybe couldn't have done beforehand. And along with that, we can build supporters on different channels in a way that can be really powerful to our cause. The reach, we can obviously reach people using social media that don't specifically live in our community. We can reach people all across the world. And again, as women's organisations, that can be really, really important for us if we're campaigning to make change, or if we want to get our message out. Having the opportunity to reach people in countries globally can be really powerful. Another great thing about social media is that it's cost effective. So my background traditionally is in marketing, and I've ran campaigns of all different sizes across digital platforms, but social media is the one that you can always get the kind of best value for money from, I would say. You can have a relatively small budget of a few £100s. You can actually make a pretty big impact using a range of different channels. And we'll chat a little bit more about that later on. Social media can be really crucial in terms of recruitment, whether that's recruiting for new jobs or whether you're recruiting volunteers. And at Empower as well, we basically recruit for all of our volunteers using social media. We recruit for our photographers for events using social media. And we also set up every single one of our events that we're hosting, and we use social media to push that message out there. And fundamentally, social media is where most people are at. It's where you can kind of tap into community groups. You can speak to specific groups of people. And again, that can be really, really useful for us as women's organisations when we're targeting specific people. But we do know that running social media accounts can actually be really daunting for people, especially if, for example, you're not maybe used to doing it. If you've been asked to be put in charge of a social media account, if you're starting out in a new role, or as Eleanor and I find, we are running the Empower Project social media on top of running the charity, and that can be quite stressful. And it's also quite worrying to think about the fact that any message that you put out on social media, you're putting it into a very, very public forum, and that can also be quite stress-inducing as well. And what we recommend is just planning to make sure that you combat any of the kind of fears and anxieties that you might have about posting content across social media. Make sure you've got plenty of time to draft content, to chat to members of the team, to speak to people within the community about some of your social media campaign content, and just take time to make sure that whenever you're planning social media activity, you can review and approve everything before you post it out on social. And just remember that everyone has the same kind of worries and fears when they're new to social media and when they're new to running social as part of their day job as well. So it's completely normal to feel stressed out about that sometimes, and we can talk a little bit more about that later on as well. I'm just going to hand back to Eleanor to take you to the next bit.
So this next section that we're going to look at is a kind of very basic introduction to the most commonly used social media platforms. Of course, we're not suggesting that you need to get one of each of these platforms, but what I want to do is give you just a little bit of information about the kind of way that each platform is used, and there is a resource link that will be on our PowerPoint, but it is also on the handout that we've given Rosa, which will give you a little bit more in-depth information about these sites and how to use them as a charity. So first up, Emily, is everyone's most and least favourite platform, which is Twitter. So Twitter is used by essentially the majority of companies, politicians, and change makers throughout the world. So it's really is the best platform for charities to engage with influencers. Now, when I say influencer, I don't necessarily mean someone like, for example, Kylie Jenner, who gets paid to wear a certain brand of a certain brand of clothing or makeup and then tag them in that post as a marketing scheme. Influencers, as in its traditional term, people who can influence policy and decision making. So it's really the best platform for you to work with them and get them to amplify your message. It also has the potential to get your message to new and diverse audiences. And the logistic of Twitter is essentially that you are able to post images, videos, documents, and links, but you have a limit of 280 characters to describe what you are posting in a text box. It used to be 140, so they expanded it a little bit. And one of the new things that Twitter does now is the ability to create a thread, which is a number of tweets linked to each other, which is a useful tool if you want to give out additional information underneath your kind of attention-grabbing tweet. So this link here is very useful. It's from the UK domain, which is literally how to use Twitter as a small charity, and that link is on the form. So the next one is Facebook, which is probably the one that people are most familiar with. Now, Facebook, the average age of a user on Facebook is over 40, and that's simply just because of when Facebook started. And you'll find now that a lot of people in, Gen Z and below potentially won't have a Facebook account, or if they do, they only use it to keep in touch with people. So Facebook has two functions that you can use as a charity. So you can set up a public page, which works the same way as a Twitter profile or an Instagram, where you can share information and do posts with photographs, videos, links, etc. It also has the function to create a group forum page like a private group, which is a really great forum for individuals to discuss, but you can also use it to keep in touch with a community or a group that you're currently working with. So for example, if you are running a program that you have 10 people in and they need to work together, a Facebook group is a really a really useful tool to use that, rather than potentially doing something such as getting everyone's phone numbers. Another benefit of going on Facebook is that Facebook advertising is cost effective, and you have a very good breakdown of targets that you can select when pushing out your advertisement to reach certain groups of people. Again, the UK domain have a guide on about the best way to use this for small charities. So the link is here, but you'll also get it on the handout. Okay, next up is Instagram, and Instagram is probably the most used platform by young people, and it's essentially Twitter for photographs. So rather than posting a text-based tweet, a text-based, might probably know what the term is, a text-based post, it's image-based. So while all the image have captions, and the captions don't have a character limit, the image is the most important part, so you need to ensure that you make that eye-catching. So it's a really good way to share, for example, photographs of the services that you're providing, or to campaign on something specific, or also potentially to advertise any resources and such like. They also now have a new feature which only started a couple of years ago, which is called Instagram Stories, and more now we see that they're being used more frequently than the Instagram feed. When you're planning your content, you need to ensure that you're thinking about stories as well. Now, I'm going to talk about Snapchat, I think, next, but the story feature on Instagram essentially is you post something in this story, but it only lasts for 24 hours. And the really great thing is that on these, you have the ability to do things such as ask questions to get people to engage with you. You can run polls. And you can also do things like countdown services, and it comes with lots of small funny images that you can kind of put along these things. And we find now, so in my job, I work for another women's organisation, and we often find that Instagram stories is where we get the most engagement from people rather than on our feed. It's very easy for someone to like something that you've posted. What you really want to do is get people to engage with conversations that you're starting in your stories. And I've just posted a link here, which is an article called Be Awesome on Instagram, and that was a webinar that was run. And I'd really recommend that for some hints and tips about how to ensure that your Instagram is engaging. So next up we have Snapchat, which is Snapchat and TikTok are probably the least used by charities, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't think about it depending on what your audience is. So Snapchat is an app where essentially you can send quick images to individuals which delete after 10 seconds. It also has this story option, which again is available on Instagram and now Facebook. So stories last for 24 hours before deleting, so it's not necessarily a good option for people who are coming to your page to find out information. It can be very useful for short attention-grabbing adverts. Now in the link here, which is on your handout, there is a very good example of this that was used by the WWF, and they used the fact that stories only lasted for a certain amount of time to bring awareness to animals that are in danger of going extinct. It's a very short, very engaging way of highlighting attention to an issue through this format. So the last one that we're going to look at is TikTok, which is probably the newest one, and certainly one that charities haven't necessarily gone in big on yet. Which to the point that when I looked up how to use TikTok as a charity, there wasn't really any research that had been done on that yet. So I have posted a link, which is the basics of how to use TikTok, because I have no idea. Essentially, TikTok is a video sharing platform where users can create videos with limited special effects. So you might have seen this on other social media platforms, because you can also create it on TikTok, download it and share it elsewhere. And you can also engage on the platform. So it gives you the ability to splice short videos together in funny ways, add text onto your videos. So it's definitely excellent for creating short, engaging videos. If you don't necessarily want to use the platform to engage with others, you can use it to download and have those videos to use elsewhere. It is predominantly used by younger people, so aged 24 and under. Again, there's a thing on like literally how to use TikTok, and that should be quite useful. So I'm going to pass over to Emily now, who's going to talk about strategizing your social media.
Sure, that's fine. Sorry, I'm just aware there's quite a lot of questions coming in. I don't want to miss people out. So just to say that, yes, we are going to share the slides. You'll have everything after. And in terms of discussing Instagram stories specifically, we are going to come on to talk about content in a wee bit, so we can maybe discuss specific examples of like Instagram stories in the Q&A. And I think the resource that Eleanor popped in, that webinar, the separate session, also speaks quite a lot about specific content for Instagram as well. So there's a couple of things within this that you can use to think about Instagram stories specifically too. So I'm just going to speak a little bit about creating a simple strategy for social media. And a lot of people that I've worked with in the past before, like as soon as you start thinking about a social media strategy, you think it's going to be this like enormous daunting document. But I've broken it down into like a couple of simple steps that you can use just to start thinking about how you would potentially pull together a social media strategy and the crucial things that you need to think about in terms of planning and measuring your success on social media. So first things, preparation is really, really important. And we've already touched upon a little bit within this session about the pressure that lots of people work under within a women's organisation. So you're often doing like 100 things at once, and sometimes you just don't even get a second to take a step back and to prepare and to plan, especially if you're running social media on top of your day job, which a lot of us probably are. So taking just a wee bit of time to prepare and to think about your resource is really important. So before setting up like any social media account, like if you're thinking about setting up a TikTok or Snapchat, if you've not used that before, or if you're launching a campaign, it's important to prepare and to allocate those resources. So think about the kind of the time that is going to take to set up a new social media account, for example, and also think about the time it takes to consistently post across social media channels. So at Empower, we always try to commit to like at least 2 posts a week, because that is something that we can commit to within the time constraints that we are under. Keeping on top of both the content and on top of responses, so people checking in with you on social, asking questions, is all a huge time commitment. So it's great if you can have someone, like one person within your organisation who is responsible for social, who is in charge of running your campaigns, if that is possible. And it's also good to keep things consistent in terms of if something has gone wrong on social, or if someone is asking a really urgent question. It's just quite good to have one person who is accountable for, example, responding to responses online, just to make sure that you're looking after service users on social media, and things can get sorted out in quite a timely fashion as well. So thinking specifically about setting up a plan, setting up a strategy. I think a lot of people, again, that I've worked with in the past before, quite rightly just kind of think about social media as like one audience. But as Ellen has spoken about just then, every platform can be used in a different way to target different groups of people, and it can be used in quite powerful ways to engage with specific demographic groups across society. So crucially, your social media strategy should be focused on your goals, and it should be aligned to specific goals that work for your organization. So you need to figure out what you want to achieve and how you're going to achieve it in a realistic time frame. I'd recommend maybe trying to tackle smaller goals first, setting objectives that you can maybe try to meet within a 6-month time frame. And that will allow you to scale up or down your social media content in a way that is reasonable for your charity or organization's capacity. So thinking about specific goals that you could set at the outset of your strategy. For example, do you want to grow your audience? That's something that I've spoken to people about a lot before. They want to grow their followers from 100 to 1,000. And that's a really good kind of tangible goal that you can set. And then you can design your content based on that specific goal of engaging different types of users online. For some organizations, a goal is to increase awareness of your organization, and social media is a great channel to do that. So general brand awareness activities to increase engagement, again, is a really kind of crucial key goal that you could set. And if you're running brand awareness activities, you could very much focus on your organization's identity, who your organization is, and you could again design content that is suited to that particular need. Thinking about community engagement as well. A really powerful thing about social media is that if you have fantastic engagement on your social media channels, that can actually translate into people using your services in real life. So if someone receives a great kind of response from someone on your social channels, that then might translate into a call to your helpline, for example, or that could translate into someone donating money to your services. So putting a focus on community engagement as a goal for your strategy could also be really important. Again, just quickly thinking about potentially your strategy could be built around directing people to your website or to your helpline or to other services that you might have. And again, that's a really targeted goal. So for example, the goal that you set out could be, I want to increase hits to my website by 20%. And again, all of your content that you design could then be focused around driving traffic to your website. And fundraising, again, a lot of social media campaigns and content are actually focused around fundraising, and either directing people to like donate buttons on social media or directing people to a GoFundMe campaign. At Empower, we ran a really successful GoFundMe campaign earlier this year. We wanted to raise £1,000 for our charity, and we did that purely by promotion on social media, and that was really effective for us. As part of our kind of ongoing strategy to build funds for the organisation. So then the kind of next part of the strategy would be to think about who exactly your audience is, and knowing your audience is crucial to success. So as Alana mentioned, as I said before, you can kind of pick the social media channels that you want to use and to operate to engage with different people in different ways and at different times. As a women's organisation, often people that we're wanting to speak to would be self-identifying women all across Scotland. But sometimes we actually want to speak to like different types of people as well. We could want to speak to politicians, we could want to speak to other organizations, we could want to speak to platforms, we could want to speak to Twitter as an example. So deciding and designing exactly where your target audience is, depending on your campaign or on your goal, is crucial. If you're thinking about launching a campaign, for example, on social media, I would suggest the best place to do that would be on Twitter. You will be able to reach politicians all across the political scale on Twitter in a way that you could maybe never reach on a kind of normal basis. So social media has really allowed us to break down some of the barriers that we might face traditionally as charities, and it has allowed us to engage with politicians across the spectrum in a much easier way. You can also use different social media tools to help you understand your audiences a little bit better. And again, we'll come on to discuss how you can use analytics and how you can use specific tools to find out exactly who your audience is when they're online, how you can engage with them. And again, that can be really helpful for you planning your strategy. I'm just going to speak a little bit about engagement as a kind of fundamental part of drawing up a strategy. And I always say this to like everyone I speak to about social, the kind of easiest way to approach engagement with your audiences on social is to treat them like the exact same way that you would treat someone if they walked into your office or if they walked into one of your services. There shouldn't be any disconnect as to how you engage with people on social. You should treat them in the exact same way as how they would be treated in a real life setting. So on social media, you are in the spotlight, whether you've got 100 followers or 100,000 followers. It's really important that your social media channels reflect your organization's tone of voice and your values, and crucially, you can build that into your strategy. It's really important, I think, in terms of engagement, to have kind of basic rules that can be applied for users who want to interact with you. So if your organisation has got service users, for example, they could be seeking advice on an issue, they could be wanting to book an appointment with you. It's really important that you build in the space and the time to reply to those users on social media. And it kind of goes without saying that like all engagement should be professional and polite all of the time. I think it's quite easy sometimes to panic as well if you receive like critical or negative engagement on social. But again, there's a couple of things that you can do to respond to people in a way that is quick and timely. And again, you can build in like parts of your strategy that focus particularly on like how do you respond to people who are being negative on social media. What we do is we've got stock responses that we can use. So you can kind of keep them in a bank. So if you are receiving lots of negativity on a certain issue, you've got like key points that you can use to push out to people and to reply to them really quickly and to acknowledge why they're feeling in a certain way. You can also maybe encourage that conversation to happen offline, or you can try to get them to speak to you in your like personal messages as well, so you can have a bit more of a personal interaction with people. And again, just thinking about engagement for you as potentially someone who is operating social channels. Think about your own boundaries as well. Again, we'll come on to speak about self-care a wee bit later on. But in your kind of social media strategy or policy document, it's really important to kind of stipulate the action that you will take as an organisation, if you are thinking about blocking or reporting people who are being abusive to you online, and always check in with your staff, if that staff member is not you, who are operating your social accounts, to make sure that they're feeling okay if they're dealing with quite challenging or negative situations. So measurement. Whenever I chat to people about measurement on social media, like there's always that kind of fear or maybe lack of understanding about how measurements actually work. But I think it's really important that as part of any strategy that measurement is kind of built in as like a fundamental part of this. And there's lots of tools that you can use again to measure your successes on social media. I guess we all want to make sure that our content and reaching our target audience is actually having a positive effect. And you can set out some kind of key measures to help you do that. So I would always suggest that you set like specific KPIs or impact measurements when you're planning your social media content. For example, if your goal is to grow your audience, one of your kind of key measurements could be that you increase your followers by 20% by July this time next year. And make sure that you have quite realistic KPIs. At Empower, we know, for example, that it's going to be kind of difficult for us to grow our followers up to 20,000 within a short space of time, but we have got specific measurements in place about growing our followers across certain channels, and our content is built around doing that. Chat to your team or speak to other people across your organisation about the kind of aims and goals of your upcoming social media campaigns. What do you want that campaign to do? What do you want it to achieve? And how are you going to measure that? So what is the kind of key measurement of that going to be? Is it we want to get 1,000 comments on this post? Is it we want to get 20 people signing up to our new webinar? Is it we want to direct 1,000 people onto our campaign webpage? It's really important that you kind of know and you set out measurements as you're going along. And again, there's lots of tools that you can use to help you evaluate and to measure your performance. And we will come on to talk about those in the next section. And also ask your audience. I think a lot of the time people forget that social should be a two-way conversation. So you could set up a session, an Instagram story, or do like an Instagram live, for example, where you ask your audiences on social what they want to see from you, what would be really helpful for them, what kind of content do they want to see, and you can design some content around that as well. I know that we've done similar things to that at Empower. So I think there is potential that you could ask your audience what they want from you, and then build some of your content around that as well.
I'm just going to jump in here because a question came in. A KPI is a key performance indicator.
Yeah, sorry, that's right. I should have said that before. This is me, like with my marketing hat, I'm just using jargon, which is not okay. But yeah, key performance indicator or impact measurement, as it's sometimes called as well. So just KPI is essentially just a kind of target that you'll set yourselves when you're wanting to measure your engagement or performance in a digital sense. Sorry, I should have said that. In terms of monitoring and analysing, again, this is quite similar. I think it's really important to keep things consistent when it comes to social media. For example, if you have one post that performs like really, really well one day, don't think you can just like take the next 2 weeks off posting on social. It's really important that you keep things consistent and you keep engaging and having those conversations with people online. But also don't worry if a post doesn't get as many likes or shares or comments as what you anticipated. Just learn from that. If something doesn't perform well, think about why that might be. I'll chat to you a little bit later on about tracking what time people are online. But again, organisations that I've worked with before will send out posts at a time that potentially works for their social media person, but actually none of their audience is online at that time. So you can use like scheduling tools to post at like optimum times when your audiences are going to be online. So there's like tools such as Facebook Insights and Twitter Analytics that can help you track and monitor and analyze the posts that people like, the posts that people are engaging with the most, and even the demographics that your followers are. So I think it's really important that you can use that information to match your online activity to when your users are active and when they're engaging with your content. And having that kind of insight should hopefully be really useful as you kind of plan your strategy going forward. And again, we'll speak about that a little bit later on. Cool. So the next thing we're going to talk about is similar in a sense to thinking about a strategy. The strategy should kind of be the skeleton, the outline of what you want to achieve, how you're going to do it, how you're going to reach your audiences, who your audience is, and that kind of thing. But the content, I guess, is the really important bit. The content is like the meat on the bone in terms of making sure that your social media content campaigns are successful. And getting content right can be challenging, but a key thing is that you are kind of willing to experiment and willing to try some things that are maybe new that you haven't done before as a way of engaging with your audiences online. So thinking specifically about the types of content that you can create, we would always say that where you can, to be visual and to be interactive as a way of kind of driving that engagement with your content. And this doesn't mean that you have to have like super fancy graphics, or you have to do everything in Photoshop, or that you need to have like top-notch design skills. But even things like using bold colors and making sure that you're using like really bold like fonts or type to attract people, or using images that look exciting and eye-catching can be really helpful as well. And there's a really good tool that I'm going to talk to you about at the end of this session that allows you to create really punchy social graphics in literally 30 seconds, which is really helpful. Also, things that you can do to kind of grab people's attention, Eleanor mentioned before, is to utilize some of the inbuilt tools that we have on social platforms, like running polls, running Q&As, posting surveys, and using stories as a way of driving engagement. So across like Insta, Twitter and Facebook and Snapchat as well, all of these platforms have an inbuilt function where you can run a poll and where you can utilize specific parts of the kind of content creation in the app to build really engaging content. Even things like sharing quotes or sharing graphics or memes from other organizations as well, but making sure that you tag them can be a way to drive engagement. Like if you just don't have the time one week to create graphics or to post lots of your own organic content, share what other people are doing. Like there's lots of amazing organizations out there that are constantly posting content as well. And at Empower, we're always sharing other people's content as a way of driving engagement, not just with that organisation, but with us as well. So that's a kind of important thing you can consider too. Importantly, when you're thinking about your kind of types of content, it's important to be current. If you're a campaigning organisation, you'll have content of your own, I would imagine, that you can use to draw attention to a specific campaign that you're running to meet your organisation's goals. If you're not a campaigning organisation, you can monitor what other campaigns are upcoming with other organisations, monitor kind of what's happening in government or in Parliament, and even monitor what's happening on a daily basis within the current news cycle, so you can comment on specific news stories relating to women's issues and relating to feminism and equality that are topical, and that will allow you to be a kind of leading voice within the sector as well. So thinking about maybe if there's a specific bill that's going through Parliament, for example, do you want to comment on like activist movements? Do you want to think about the impact that COVID-19 is having on your services, for example, and share that content, be topical and be current, and always be thinking about how you can kind of move really quickly with the content that you're creating. It doesn't even have to take lots and lots of time. Like, we're often sharing specific articles on Empower to do with changes in legislation on online abuse, or commenting on like Zoom bombing, for example, trying to keep our content topical to like the current news cycle, because things change really quickly, especially within the current COVID-19 pandemic, and things can feel out of date quite quickly on social. And always plan your content in advance if you can. You can either use a social media content calendar or a scheduling tool like Hootsuite or TweetDeck that we can chat a little bit about later as well. I just wanted to mention quickly the importance of like knowing your organization's voice. Online, your kind of tone of voice should always embody your organization's mission and values. And that can be really helpful when you're thinking about how to respond to something quickly, or when you're thinking about responding to a specific news story that's just broken, and when you're thinking about replying to a specific user. It can be really helpful to have like your tone of voice written down. And tone of voice always sounds like a bit fancier than it is. At Empower, like our tone of voice is that we're bold, accessible, and fun. And those are the three words that always stick in my head. We've got them written down. So whenever we're creating content on social, as long as it's bold or it's fun, like that's absolutely grand for our organisation. That's what works to us, for us. So it's important that you stick to that tone of voice, and so your audiences feel like familiar with you when you're talking online. And it can just help, again, for when you're planning specific content, to have like specific words that work for your organization. I just wanted to chat really quickly before I hand over to Eleanor, because I've spoken for ages, about a campaign that Solace Women's Aid ran at the start of this year, like maybe March time, just before lockdown. And this was really experimental. So I saw this campaign and I thought it was really powerful. The campaign was called #HiddenAbuse. And essentially what Solace Women's Aid did was they used Twitter's new feature of the hidden reply function to launch a campaign and to drive really impressive engagement. So the purpose of the campaign was really to remind people that just because you can't see domestic abuse, it doesn't mean that it's not happening. And to demonstrate this, what the charity did was to post a picture of a seemingly happy couple with the phrase, "This is what domestic abuse looks like." Users were then kind of challenged to figure out more and to find out like what this campaign was up to, and they then went into the hidden replies onto the post, and they were shown a video, and the video then spoke about the controlling and abusive behavior that was happening between the couple, and about the way that the kind of perpetrator was gaining control over his partner, and that was a really kind of powerful way of unpicking a lot of quite complicated issues in seemingly what is a very simple post online. And it received over 2 million engagements across Twitter. And I just wanted to like pop this in as an example of how something that can be how you can actually use functions on different platforms to think about engaging with different audiences. And sometimes it's actually just good to experiment to see what works for you and maybe what doesn't work as well. I'm going to pass over to Eleanor to chat about some awesome user-led content.
Thank you, Emily. I also appreciate you talking about the awesome user-led content, as the example that we are looking at here is my employer, my full-time employer. So at YWCA Scotland, let me just switch hats here. One of the things that we do in our digital strategy is ensure that all of our content on digital platforms is user-led. Now, when we talk about user-led, we mean that when we have used the tools to look at the audience that we are wanting to engage with, but also the audience that we are engaging with, is making sure that we're doing things that are important to them. And so we essentially refer to ourselves as the voice for young women in Scotland, and want to ensure that we're using our platform to give them things that they want to hear about. So these two examples that we have here, the one on the left-hand side is what we have called Femtorial. Now, Femtorial is a weekly discussion that happens on our Instagram platform on a Wednesday morning. Is actually being run by one of our volunteers. And Iris, who is our blog editor, came to us with the idea, essentially at the start of lockdown, that this could be a really interesting way to engage with people, essentially discussing all things feminism and Feminism 101. So the most recent topic was gaslighting, and that was looked at, I think, this week. And it's essentially been one of the most amazing things that we've had on our platform. So what Iris does, and this is just to give you a bit more information about how stories work as well, is that Iris posts on the main grid what the topic is, but then the whole engagement happens through the stories. So Iris has created kind of like information and then opens up topics for discussion. So another thing that I was going to say, which we didn't put in tools, but perhaps we should have, is how much we rely on Canva. So Canva is a free design tool. And if you are a charity or a non-profit, you can have the premium version of this for free. You just need to apply for it. So all of our graphics that we create for social media are done on Canva, so that we do not have any professional designers. But Iris has created this whole series on that, and the emblem here for Young Women Speak. So Young Women Speak, one of the things that we heard from our users was that they felt there was a distinct lack of young women experts, young women being used on panel sessions, on radio interviews, giving evidence to committees. So what we did was we created a list called Young Women Speak, which is essentially an ever-growing list of young women who are experts in their field who can be used to give information about specific topics. And that's been great. So the design platform is Canva, C-A-N-V-A. It's free to sign up, and once you have your account, you can apply to get the premium one for free as a non-profit. So if we jump to the next slide, I think it's still me. I'm giving Emily a short break before we go in. So just to talk very quickly about using social media for change making. If we can jump to the next slide. So social media can be a platform for creating and sustaining positive change. And to give you kind of the most recent examples of this, obviously the first one that springs to mind, especially in the women's sector, is the Me Too movement. Now, while Me Too didn't actually start online, it was coined by Tarana Burke. When the allegations originally came out about Harvey Weinstein, it feels like forever ago, but actually it was only a short time ago, this movement became hugely amplified online, with literally thousands and thousands of women taking to all online services to talk about their experiences of sexual harassment. And Me Too has almost become a defining term for sexual harassment now. It is spoken about with regards to workplace policies. It is spoken about with regards to, for example, men in positions of power. People are spoken about as being Me Too victims or Me Too survivors. So this is kind of the most recent huge example of where something which was predominantly done online, we can now see having very impactful change in our society. On a slightly smaller scale, She Votes was a campaign that began in the general election of 2017 and was repeated in 2019, which was to encourage women under 30 to vote. It came out from research that women under 30 were some of the least likely people to go out and use their vote. And so She Votes was a digital campaign which encouraged women to post online when they had voted and pictures of them voting, and also the reasons why they voted, to build a movement to encourage all other young women to go out and use their vote. If we can jump to the next slide. The lessons that we can kind of take from this is just, it is important to take advantage of interactive activism in online communities. So if you see a hashtag that is building momentum, please do kind of jump on that and use that as a way to engage with new audiences and to gain support kind of for your charity, but also ensure that it is accessible and inclusive. Small steps are really critical on this. Not every hashtag is going to become a global phenomenon, but even if you engage your outreach by an additional 100, 200 people, that is still incredibly important and could be really beneficial for your organization. And when we're looking at this kind of small scale stuff, share the work of others in your community, because it's really important for them to know that they are valued by you, the work that they are doing, you can see the impact that it's having. It also creates really good bonding there. And to go back to kind of user-led content, the organisation I work for, YWCA Scotland, is currently running a digital campaign called Eat Your Words, which is around examining the words that we use to talk about ourselves and our body. And rather than doing a normal campaign, we essentially put out pitches to have people to essentially be like, this is what this means to me. And so basically over the course of this month and for August, we are sharing artwork, poetry, blogs based on that. And our interactions on those posts are very big. And it is really getting that discussion going. If it's possible for you to do something like that and have people come in and talk about the work that you're doing who aren't necessarily from within your organization, it's really beneficial, not only because it's good for people to see our faces, but it also gives your social media person a break, which is good for everyone. So I'm just going to go back to Emily briefly, who's going to talk about some of the tools that you can use, and then I think after that I'm coming back to close up with self-care.
Yep, awesome. So yeah, we've mentioned a couple of tools. Eleanor has done the same thing. So we just wanted to mention a few of the social media tools that we use. We've included all of the free tools. Obviously we know that budgets are often pretty strapped, as are at the Empower Project, but there is a lot of free tools that are out there that you can use to increase your social media performance, or to analyse your social media campaigns and that kind of thing. So I'll just chat a little bit about a few of those. So TweetDeck is a platform that allows you to manage like multiple Twitter accounts all from one screen. It is the official Twitter planning platform, and it's a really useful way of scheduling content, and also for monitoring conversations that happen online. So you can schedule all of your tweets. You can also have like a stream on TweetDeck that allows you to monitor specific hashtags. You can use it to track specific conversations. You can also use it to set up like specific streams. For example, if you're like a membership organization, you can have a stream that focuses on like all of your members' Twitter accounts, so you can watch those conversations as well. And it's just a pretty straightforward and easy platform to use, that allows you to schedule and manage your Twitter content in a way that will hopefully make implementing some of the steps in your strategy a little bit easier as well. And it's free. It's a free platform that you can use. I think there is a pro version of it, but as a basic platform, it's got lots of really good features that you can take advantage of. There is a resource link in here called How to Use TweetDeck, which is a really helpful step-by-step guide if you've not used TweetDeck before. And again, it's just quite a powerful way to plan and schedule all your content. Similar to this is Hootsuite, but Hootsuite, again, it's got a basic platform account that I think you can have like 3 members on it for free, and then you can pay for like a pro version as well. I use Hootsuite quite a lot. Again, it has got a lot of the functions that TweetDeck has, but you can add all of your social media channels onto Hootsuite. So you can add your Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can add lots of different channels on there. And again, the benefit of using a platform like Hootsuite is that you can schedule, plan, and you can also create your content within the Hootsuite app. Jade had sent through a specific question that someone had popped in about using Instagram on the desktop version of the app. So I'll just quickly cover that here because Hootsuite allows you to do that. So Instagram as an app wants you to use the mobile version of it. So when you go into the desktop version of Instagram, you can't actually post anything from the desktop version. You have to use the mobile version. But using a platform like Hootsuite will allow you to create all of the content in the Hootsuite desktop, and then you can just post it straight onto your Instagram platform. It's not like the most seamless way of doing it, but if you're working on a desktop or a PC, it just allows you to kind of create that content within the platform and then push it out to the channel. Again, you can like monitor hashtags and conversations using Hootsuite, and there's a resource link here just that provides a little bit more information about that platform. Pablo by Buffer is the tool that I mentioned earlier. It's a free image editing tool that allows you to create engaging and really bold social media content really quickly and easily. And their unique selling point, Pablo's unique selling point, is that apparently it allows anyone to go on to Pablo and you can create an image with under 30 seconds. And I tested this by asking my dad to do that, and he did it really successfully. So it's a really straightforward platform that you can use like stock images or upload your own images, and you can pop your logo and some text onto your image, and you can make the content work in a way that represents your brand, but that can be created really quickly if you need to react to something quickly, or if you don't have like a specific designer or design skills like Eleanor was saying. Canva is the tool that we use as well, and like Eleanor was saying, there's a free version and a pro version that charities can access as well. What we'll actually do is we'll pop a slide in on Canva before we send this out, maybe just so you've got some information on it as well. Analytics, so I've mentioned a couple of times like the inbuilt analytics tools across different social media platforms. So on Facebook and on Twitter, both of the apps have got inbuilt analytics tools, so you can constantly monitor and analyze how users are engaging with your content. Most platforms do have basic inbuilt analytics, and you can buy like pro versions of analytics tools and software if you want to, if you have budget to do that, but they're normally really expensive. So I would just suggest that you use the inbuilt tools in the social media apps that allow you to get a basic idea of when people are engaging with your content. I wanted just to quickly mention Facebook Insights. So Facebook Insights, again, is built within to the Facebook functionality. If you just go onto Insights at the top tab, you can look at all the different measurements that Facebook has inbuilt within the platform. And I just wanted to mention this is my favorite thing on Facebook Insights. I'm a bit of like a data geek, as you can probably tell, but Facebook Insights tells you exactly when your fans are online. So when people who follow you or who like your page, and when they are actually online and when they're engaging with you. So this is the Empower Project. As you can see, like most people will drop off from engaging with us at around 6-7 o'clock. And then there's a spike of activity that often happens at around like 12 o'clock. We have pretty consistent engagement like throughout the day. And when I was like looking at this, I was really surprised that like the dip falls like exactly when I guess people are like maybe commuting home from work, or when people are like going home at the end of the day, or that kind of thing. But that spike towards like 11-12 at night is also really interesting. So whenever we're planning content across Facebook or across Twitter, we'll have a look at when people are online, and we'll post out the content at the times that people are online, just as a way of making sure that we're driving the best engagement for when people are actually operating on Facebook and when they're looking at our content as well. Cool. I'm going to hand back to Eleanor. I'm aware of time, but this is just the last section that we have, and then we can start taking questions.
I'm going to talk about self-care super fast. So if we go to the first slide. So it's really important when you are your social media person, or the person that is running social media on top of their day job, that you take time to check in and think about your online self-care. So we're going to run quickly through some kind of hints and tips on how best you can do this. So we'll jump, the first section we're going to be looking at is safety. I think, Emily, you were going to come in specifically to talk about this one, and then I'll jump back on.
That's fine. So yeah, we just wanted to touch upon this as a topic, and we think it's really important, whilst we have this opportunity to speak about the really challenging and difficult time that we are living through at the moment with the coronavirus pandemic. But not just that, you know, a lot of the time people who are engaging with us, especially as women's organisations across a range of different social media platforms, are potentially vulnerable. They could have a range of mental health issues, or they could just be seeking support from somebody who is there and who is providing the opportunity for engagement. And I wanted to touch upon a really sensitive but really important subject around social media users who present as suicidal. We're having some conversations with Jade about this, and I've got experience of it myself as someone who used to run social media accounts for organisations, and dealing with people who disclose that they are feeling suicidal can of course be extremely stressful. It can be really worrying, and a lot of people, especially social media or comms people, who will be the person who is having that information disclosed to them, are not trained to deal with that. You know, that they're not trained in a way to deal with a situation like this. So a couple of tips that I can maybe suggest to you would be to note down some key responses. So offer support to that individual, acknowledge how that person feels, and direct to support services, for example, Samaritans. And always have helpline numbers available that you can use and you can provide to people really, really quickly if they are like disclosing that they feel suicidal, or that they are thinking about that. Samaritans actually run specific training courses about speaking to vulnerable people online. I've taken one of those in the past, and maybe just check if there's anything that they're currently running that could work for your team, and just I guess like plan for the eventuality that this could happen to someone who is running your social media accounts. You know, it's not uncommon or unlikely for someone who is in a situation like this to reach out to an organization, a trusted organization like many of us run, looking for support really quickly. And you could potentially look at linking up with specific partners as well, like look at maybe establishing a relationship with Samaritans, so they can provide that specific support to people who are feeling like that. And crucially, just before Eleanor comes on to speaking about self-care, always make a specific effort to look after the person who is dealing with that situation, whether it's yourself or whether it's someone in your team, whether it's a volunteer or your members of staff. Make sure that member of staff is okay, and being the person that has to deal with a situation like that can be really, really challenging and can have a massive impact on that individual. So just check in with your social media staff and make sure that they are also okay and that they have the space to talk about the impact that has on them as well. And again, if anyone's got any more specific questions on dealing with and looking after vulnerable people online, we can maybe chat a little bit more about that in the Q&A. I just thought it was really important to touch on that moment.
Okay, so we're coming to the end now. So looking at safety of you online, my number one top tip for everyone, anytime, anywhere, is please, please, please report any abuse that you receive. It is now incredibly easy to report across all social media platforms. There are, of course, discussions to be had about how these platforms take responsibility for this, but it is important that you use this function. Ensure that you have a procedure or policy in place for when users are abusive to you or your staff. I'm going to talk about some potential ways that you could do this, and always try and think about setting some kind of boundary for yourself, as in, when will you escalate this? Will you report it to the platform? At what point would you potentially need to get the police involved, because online abuse is legal? And so just because it's happening on Twitter doesn't mean it's any less bad than if it happened to you on the street. Okay, go next. We're just going to race through these last little bits. Privacy is a really important thing, and this is something that I would recommend that you think about, not just as part of your organisation, also for the staff members of your organisation who may be very active online and have that link to your charity. So think about if your social media accounts are private, and also think about when was the last time that you checked your privacy settings, because occasionally when there's an update on a platform, that might alter your privacy settings. So for example, you may think that you have a private Facebook account, but in reality something changed and all of the posts that you've been posting for the past year are not private. So it's really important to have a good, healthy privacy checkup. Think about who you let follow you. As a company account, I wouldn't recommend being private unless you're using that as a safe space for your users. It's certainly something that I would recommend you think about if you're very visibly part of the charity and something happened, for example, with the charity. You don't then want that to reach out into your personal accounts. Moving on. Think about your boundaries, and this is so especially important right now when we are flooded with information and misinformation online. And we see so much content that this can become really overwhelming. However, social media does allow us to kind of edit our feeds in a number of ways that can limit the harmful or abusive content that we see, or simply conversation that's happening online that is triggering or upsetting for you, that you just would rather not log on to Twitter and it be the first thing that you see. So please take advantage of these settings. The filter and mute button are your friends, as is the block button, which may be the one that you use when it gets to the extreme. You can not only mute words, so for example, if you are sick of hearing about, I don't know, coronavirus, it is possible to go onto your Twitter and mute specific words. So you could mute coronavirus, COVID-19, COVID, etc. And that will kind of take that out of your feed. Obviously, that doesn't mean it won't catch everything, because if they talk about it without using the specific words, some might get through. As it's a mute, you do then have the option, if you wanted to go on BBC News, for example, to then read about that. You can say, yes, I would like to see this, even though it contains a word that I muted. You can also mute people. So for example, in the charity sector, where you want to engage with open conversation, you potentially don't want to be seen as that charity that blocks people. So one thing that you can do is mute them, which means that they can still interact with you as much as they want, but you will never know. So that's a really useful function. Think about when you will block and report someone. Please don't let it get to a stage where it's becoming almost unbearable. Think about what is your limit, and think about when and who you're going to engage with. You don't need to respond to absolutely every comment or post. Please use your energy wisely. Speaking of energy, my laptop's about to die, so Emily, if you switch on, I'm on the move. Of course, I don't have a plug where I'm sitting. This is the life of working at home. So think about the support that you need online. What do you need from your online world? Sometimes it might simply be the support that you need in everyday life, so from your family and friends. Also ensure that you set yourself boundaries for your social media, and that the people that you are friends with also know your boundaries. So for example, are you comfortable with your friends taking photographs of you and then posting them online without your consent? Are you comfortable being tagged into certain locations? It's really okay for you to not want this content shared of you online. And please just talk to people and tell them about kind of the boundaries that you've set here. And it's also really important to talk to those around you about online abuse and ensure that these conversations are happening and it's not happening in a little vacuum of women's rights organisations who talk about this anyway. And I think that's it from us. And I think we hit probably almost exactly an hour.
Yeah,
we've ran through an unbelievable amount of content.
So
a few questions. So
brilliant. Thanks so much both. So I'll just run through the questions we've had come through. So I think a couple that came through before the session have been answered in the session. But there was one just around the use of hashtags in terms of specific words as opposed to sort of a created campaign. So words like endometriosis, does using them on Twitter and Facebook do anything? Is there kind of a point to that, and is it worth adding them in for words that are associated with the issue that the organisation's addressing?
I can take that one if you want, Eleanor. Yeah. So I would always recommend that you use hashtags. The benefit of using a hashtag with a relevant word that could work within your campaign essentially just means that all of the content that is, like, for example, hashtag empower, all of the content is collated onto a specific feed for that word. So if you've got someone who is searching specific words or topics and you've used hashtag empower, that will come up. So I always think it's really important to use hashtags, even if they maybe feel like a little bit outdated now, or they're maybe not used as often. I think if you're trying to build followers or if you're trying to build awareness of your organization, always just use hashtags as a way of like keeping involved in like a wider conversation on an issue. There's also nothing to say that you can't jump onto other hashtags. Like if there's a hashtag that already exists, like for example the hashtag hidden abuse campaign that Solace Women's Aid ran, there'll be lots of people who already use hashtag hidden abuse, but what that does is that when a campaign launches using that hashtag, it just makes that movement much stronger, and the kind of the environment around that becomes much louder and more powerful. So if there's already a hashtag that exists that would work for your campaign or that would work for your organisation, just jump on it, just use it, because then you can already be involved in a conversation that's happening, and your content will be pushed out to probably a lot more people that way as well. So you don't always think you have to come up with your own like super creative hashtag. I always just adopt ones that were already out there and already used as well.
Rosa, you're not Rosa. Jade, you're muted.
I'm back. So we have a few questions and people just asking about whether the recording's been shared and about links to the resources. So just to say, yes, we're recording this webinar and we'll be sharing the recording along with resources and links next week. So I'll be in touch just to share all that with you. And then we had a question quite early on when you were talking about platforms, just around the sort of privacy issues of TikTok, just on your thoughts around that.
So I saw that, fortunately. So when Emily was speaking, I was able to have a quick look and see what the latest updates on that are.
Brilliant.
So I think, unfortunately, like with all these social media platforms, they do keep a lot of your data. And yes, there seems to be an issue currently with TikTok, and there's talks about it being potentially banned in Australia and the States. But this seems to have come in under what's currently going on between the States and China. That's most recently come in now because the UK is going to ban all Huawei mobiles from being on the 5G network. When I read into this, it seems TikTok does not contain any more information than your Facebook does. So we are just going to have to kind of wait and see how this pans out. But certainly at the moment, it's not set to be banned in the UK. There's not really any discussion of that yet, but I think it will all depend on what happens if the US decide to ban it.
Yeah. Great, thank you. So our next question is, do you have any advice on how to pre-plan social media content in advance in reference to topics in the news and in the sector changing so quickly?
Yeah,
Sorry,
that was me. I was going to jump in and say,
yeah.
Obviously it's not necessary to schedule absolutely everything that you're going to post. There's obviously still a place for immediate reactions to things. But what it is really beneficial to use scheduling for is, for example, if you know that you have a specific campaign coming up, or if you know that there's specific workshops that you're running or a program that you're doing. So for example, currently in my day job, I have scheduled up until August all of different webinars that we're running because I know that that's not going to change. And that just means that I don't have to think about that along with, replying to people and the such like. I don't know, Emily, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Like I would say the same thing. Like there's planning content is really, really useful, like for really busy times, and like we always try to schedule stuff as much as possible. But obviously if you're reacting to like a news story that's just breaking that day, like you would obviously want a bit of flexibility in responding to that. Something that I have set up is something called a Google Alert. I'm not sure if any of you have used that before, but Google Alerts are essentially ways that you can monitor what's happening on the web. They're quite annoying. Like I've got Google Alerts set up for lots of different issues and topics, but you can go on to literally just type in Google Alerts into Google, and you can monitor like specific topics. So you could monitor like feminism, or you could get maybe more specific and be like feminist issues happening in Edinburgh, for example. And what Google will do is they'll send you on like a fairly consistent daily basis all of the news that's coming up that is relating to those specific words. So if you're really keen to kind of monitor topics and monitor the kind of news cycle, you could set up Google Alerts that are specific to your organization, and that would allow you to be notified when things are happening. Another thing as well is if you want to like plan content around specific news items or like current news topics, is just share content that other people are talking about as well. Like if there's a particular journalist or if there's specific organizations that that do really good like reactive work to news stories, we retweet that kind of stuff quite a lot, and then just put like a couple of sentences about what Empower's view on that is as well, which can be a quick way of getting your voice heard on that specific topic as well.
Right, and then we have a question on analytics. So I think at the point you were talking about specific platform analytics tools, someone asked, how do you find them?
How do you find them? Okay, yeah. Cool. So I'm just thinking, I wonder, thinking if I could go into Facebook, but probably not. So again, I could maybe just send some screenshots if that would be helpful within the resources pack. But I can quickly just like talk to it. So if you go into like the Facebook main page, there's like a menu, and then there's like a second menu that's got a few different topics on there. And one of the names of the content. I think it was within the, it's called Facebook Insights, and that's how you get to Facebook Insights. It's a similar thing on Twitter. You just go into like your Twitter menu, and then there's an option for like Twitter analytics. But I will take some screenshots and pop them into the resources pack. That will just kind of take you through those steps, and so you have them to hand as well.
Brilliant, thanks, Emily. And we have another analytics question around Facebook analytics, switching it back to GMT from automatically being on PST. I think that's quite a technical one. I'm not sure if we're able to answer it now, but that's something that we can always include in the resource, just because I think it'll take some hunting around to work out ourselves.
Can do that, definitely. That's
yeah.
fine.
So we'll make sure to include an answer to that one in the resource. And in the meantime, we have a question on, is there any point to using blogs and linking these to social media platforms?
Yes, I think blogs are a really incredible way of going far more in depth to what you're talking about. I think what you'll find as well is, rather than linking it to your social media platform so it automatically posts, a really good thing that you can do is just use the link and then almost write a kind of introduction. So if you're posting it on Twitter, you can be like, this morning we posted a blog about the history of women in Scotland, and then have like a quote from the blog to kind of advertise that. So yeah, I would say, while blogs are maybe not used so much anymore in terms of people going on and reading it, especially, to see what's new on the blog, and maybe for individuals that works, but not necessarily so much for organizations, is still an incredibly useful tool to showcase, the diverse things that you do, but also to have potentially guest bloggers on as well.
Well, thanks both. So we had someone mention saying something about WhatsApp. I'm not sure if that's something we can include in the resource, or if that's something that we want to cover, but yeah, just to say.
I mean, WhatsApp's not, I wouldn't refer to WhatsApp as a social media platform. I think WhatsApp can be very useful to keep in touch with people that are on your programs. Of course, the issue with WhatsApp is that then people have to be comfortable with giving you their phone number, and people need access to the internet to use it. So yes, it is a very useful tool, and it's certainly not useful in terms of engaging with campaigns and the such like that we've been discussing about. But I would, if it's a tool that works for the people that are accessing your services, then that is great. I wouldn't use it as a social media platform.
Yeah. Well, and then I've just seen that we have a question in the chat around an organisation who's created their charity Facebook page from a personal Facebook page, which means they can't give access to other staff. So what's the best solution, and can an account be created for the charity?
Sorry,
which I think,
yeah, I'll just have a quick look at that message in the chat. Oh, what's going off here? So someone has set up they've got their own personal account, and they've set up the charity's account as a page on their personal site. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what I think that is saying, as opposed to a separate organisational Facebook group. Yeah. I think again that's perhaps something that we can touch on in the resource. Or
you should still be able to give people access to that page, but yeah, again, we can maybe just detail how to do that within the resources as well. But I'm pretty sure you should be able to do that. I think that's how we've set up our account as well, and you can still give people access to that. But yeah, we can just put some pointers in resources, Jay. Might be a bit easier.
Brilliant. Yeah. We've got a few minutes left of the session now, so we've got a couple more questions in the chat, which hopefully we can try and run through really quickly.
Yeah, we'll just quick fire answer.
Quick fire round, yeah. So is there any tool to help the target audience with hearing or vision impairments on social media platforms?
I don't think there is. In terms of accessibility, first thing I would recommend is always use the alt text for your images. All platforms now have this built in. Twitter also recently just added this for GIFs. You can now add alt text if you're using GIFs. And there's also a number of captioning apps. I can't think of the name of one specifically off the top of my head, but if you are posting videos on your Instagram stories, there are apps that you can use to add captions. So there definitely isn't kind of like a one thing fits all, but there is opportunity out there to do that.
Brill, thank you. And I think we have time for maybe one more question before we'll need to wrap things up. So we have a question around, is it effective to have a newsletter as well as social media? Now I know that's kind of more general content and communications, but
yeah, I think so. We have a newsletter. I think especially if you're a membership organisation, I think it's really important to provide different content for your members than would if they just followed you on Twitter or just kind of checked your blog. And it's a good way to kind of send up a roundup of everything. You can be like, you may have missed, this is what we're doing. And I think it's just a really good way of keeping your members engaged.
Yeah,
yeah, well, and so I think that's kind of all we have time for in terms of questions, because I just want to take a few minutes to say thanks so much to Eleanor and Emily for hosting, and thank you everyone for joining the session. I know I was thinking as you went through all of the content, which is so much and so many amazing useful points, just how overwhelming I think it can be knowing where to start on social media. So I'm really hoping that this session has given everyone a bit of an idea of how they can do that in an accessible way with the resource they have. So I certainly think that you've done that really brilliantly. So thank you
for inviting us as well, Jay.
Yeah.
We really appreciate it.
No, it's been brilliant.
If you go to last slide, you can. I think our contact details are on there. I'm sure I put our contact details on the last slide.
Brill. I'll include those two in the email that we'll send out after.
And it's on the handout sheet.
Brill. So that's also just to say, as I mentioned before, we'll be recording and putting together the resources that Emily and Eleanor have talked about in the session. And you can expect to get an email from me or potentially Zoom. I think it'll probably be Zoom. To link you to that page on our site. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, of course, you can get in touch with me. My email address is jade@rosauk.org, and I can answer any questions you have more generally. And then, as Eleanor said, if you have anything specific, if you want to get in touch with the team at the Empower Project, you can do that too. So yeah, I hope you've all found it as useful as I have.
Thanks everyone for joining as well.
Yeah, thank you
so much.
And there's lots of nice comments in the chat, which is a good way for us to go into our afternoon.
I've just realised all of the chat is going on.
Really good vibes going into the afternoon.
Yeah,
thank you.
This is great. Thank you everyone, and we really appreciate you joining us.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you everyone.
Bye bye.